Hello, everybody. Welcome. Dave, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. I was actually just wanting to find out if anyone was speaking, and I was just having audio issues or whatever. Sorry. That might have not been the right way of doing that. So, although I will kick it off and say, how are folks feeling about yesterday and losing Drew and Rohan?
Yeah, let's get started right away. We actually didn't get Wes's thoughts on it. Wes, what do you think about yesterday's events?
I think it sounds like a good transition. Rohan and Drew both seem positive. So I think that's a good thing. Elon responded, that was positive. And being in tech and seeing transitions like this is pretty common. There's kind of like four outcomes that will play out over time. One, they'll end up at another company pretty quickly, and then you'll probably know that they just wanted to change. Another one is that they'll take time off, maybe like 6 months or even a year, and then maybe go to another company. Another option is, we just don't see them show up anymore in professional workspace, and they end up being like just kind of commentators, maybe kind of like me. And then I think the other one would be that they not only end up at another company, but they potentially end up at a competitor. And so we'll just see how it plays out. He'll be missed. Like I wrote a couple posts on it, and yeah, it sucks. I know he's left, a good legacy behind, and I'm sure he's proud of that. So I just didn't know Rohan very well. I just know him from his posts over the last couple of months, but it seems like somebody cool is taking. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. Omar, is Wes breaking up for you too?
Yeah, a little bit. I could hear most of what he was saying.
You guys are crystal clear, so sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you anyway. It's good to have you on here. Obviously, you were working with Drew, so you have a very unique perspective into what's happening. Ziobi, go ahead.
I also would love to get your perspective if you think like one of these men would end up in the board within like a year or so.
I hope I'm coming through clear, but yeah, that's very possible. I could see that happening.
I definitely think it's unfortunate to lose senior leadership, obviously, all at once, but I think it diffuses where these people are going to do after. The exits seem very gracious too. And I also want to submit the Delaware case premise on a faulty board. So I think, there might be some stuff under the surface that we won't outright know. It's pretty much speculation, but maybe we'll hear in a book, right?
Thinking about a book too.
Omar,
I kind of hope that happens.
Yeah. Omar, how are you?
Hey, doing good.
Are you in your Cybertruck again?
No, I'm in my apartment with a stable internet connection finally, and excited to hear about the Tesla Spring software update that's coming out.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'm going to pin Tesla's post at the top of your screens so you can follow along as Omar talks through some of these updates coming. I mean, this was kind of unexpected, wasn't it, Omar?
Yeah, I mean, typically the big update comes in the winter.
Yeah, so what's new in this update that's exciting to you?
Well, I mean, it's nothing earth-shattering, but it's just Tesla continuing their process of just making the cars better over time. I remember when the holiday update came out this year, some people said that they were a little bit disappointed in it. I think they went back and said, we need to do better. And Elon actually, commented, I think at one point, we need to step our game up or something like that. So I think they said, okay, well, let's do something for the spring. And there's quite a few little things in here. So for the 3 and Y, you're now seeing a new UI that's reflecting some of the changes we've seen in the Cybertruck. Now, I kind of like the Cybertruck's UI. I've actually found it's kind of nice how it has this big Cybertruck when you're parked, and you can just easily tap on what you want, open the front, open the trunk, but you can also navigate and click the navigation buttons. And there's a little map in the corner when you have the FSD visualization. So all of those kind of UI changes from the Cybertruck, they have some nice things there, but they haven't been available on the 3 and Y yet. So they're going to be bringing that over as well. And I think that's going to be well received. It does look like it's only for cars with the AMD Ryzen chipset. So that's definitely going to be disappointing to people who are on Intel Atom. But hey, maybe it's a reason to go take advantage of some of these great deals and buy a car. Then they've got the new auto shift. So now pretty much every Tesla except the Model Y has moved to the stockless controls. The Model Y is now the last Tesla left with stocks. Cybertruck, 3Y, SX, all stockless. And they've had auto shift out of park, which means when you're parked, you just push down on the brake and the Tesla vision system picks whether you want to go forward or backward. But that's only worked when you're coming out of park. If you had to do a 3-point turn, for example, you were sliding up and down on the screen to switch between going backwards and forwards. And now what they're doing is actually extending auto shift so that it's not just out of park, but it can basically do all the shifting for you. So you could do a 3-point turn entirely without touching any gear shifter or any screen. The AI just figures out what you're doing and it just does the right thing. I have some questions about how this would work. It is going to be something you can turn on and off, but they're going to be shipping that. So that'll be really interesting. Audible is now available as a native app. Spotify has been updated. You can now sync your Spotify queue across vehicles and devices, and you can also adjust the playback speed. And they've now got this hands-free trunk feature for the new Model S or X or the new Model 3. This allows you to just stand behind your trunk, and if you stand behind your trunk for long enough, it'll just open on its own. So you've got a bunch of stuff in your hand, you need to load the trunk. You can do that without having to push any button, which is kind of cool. I could see that also being annoying if you trigger it accidentally, but of course, it's something you can turn on or off. You're now going to be able to preview Sentry Mode recordings from the mobile app. So if Sentry Mode triggers an alarm, you'll be able to get a video right on your phone. Previously, you had to go into the car and pull out the USB drive or open the dash cam to look at it. There's also increased regenerative braking on the highway for Model S and X, the new Model S and X. That should allow for better highway range. And the rear screen, all Teslas now have a rear screen except the Model Y. And the rear screen will now show current trip details, time to destination, and temperature at the top of the touchscreen. In addition, Tesla did also have some Cybertruck updates that came with this. So let me see, where was that?
You know what's really interesting in this post is that where it says rear passengers can now see current trip details, time, temperature at the top of the rear touchscreen. Next to that, there are two eyes staring at it. Did you guys see that? It's on your screen if you're watching YouTube live. And it's at the top of your screens. You have to go up, scroll down, all the way to the end of the post. There's two eyes. What do you think that means, Wes?
Sorry, you
Meta.
broke up. Two eyes? You mean like an
two
outline?
eyes. Yeah, Meta, what do you think?
I don't know.
I mean, I think it probably just means that the rear passengers can see what's going on, but maybe it's also kind of a reference to the robo taxi. These rear seats rear screens have become standard, I think they are starting to make some UI changes for that robotaxi vehicle where you may sit in the back and, use a screen in the rear in addition to, the main display.
Wes,
Sorry, what exactly can the rear passengers see? Sorry, I missed it.
trip details, time and temperature at the top of the rear screens.
Oh, wow. That's super cool. Yeah. Like, why would they need to know that other than robotaxi? That's pretty cool.
Exactly. Omar?
So, in addition, the Cybertruck is also getting some updates. Some of these are things that have been in the 3 and Y for a while. So it's kind of funny how 3 and Y are getting some Cybertruck things and Cybertruck are getting some things that's been in the mainline software. But the biggest one for Cybertruck is going to be power sharing. So this will allow your Cybertruck to power your whole home. Now, Tesla has been sending out emails to people. If you bought a Cyber Beast, you get free power share hardware and you get free installation. If you bought a dual motor like me, you get free power share hardware. That means a free wall connector with power share support, but you have to pay for installation. So we're going to be getting that installed in my parents' house down in Los Angeles. And we have a wall connector there. We're going to be replacing it with the new PowerShare wall connector. And with this update, we should theoretically be able to back out the house in the event of a power outage from the Cybertruck or any other compatible Tesla. So that's going to be cool. They've also added the colorizer, which allows you to make the Cybertruck in the UI colorized if you've wrapped it. New horn and lock sounds. Cabin overheat protection, which has been standard in Teslas for a number of years. And they've also improved the turning circle by 1.6 feet.
Yeah, that's amazing. We have Sawyer in here too now, and I just posted Tesla. I don't know if anyone noticed that. Did anyone post about that? Sawyer, did you see the eyes at the end of that Tesla post?
No.
Yeah, I'm telling you, those eyes are important. Those are some good-looking eyes. Meta.
That's just a meme. People put the eyes usually mean like look
Yeah,
at
I
this.
know,
Chin,
but like you post it when it's like something important you're looking at. You don't
Yeah,
post
yeah.
it like something
I
not
agree.
important. So I
Um,
recommend everyone in the audience to go up, scroll to that post by Tesla, and repost with a bunch of eyes. Let's see if people catch on.
that's a good idea. The other thing to think about here is when the Model S and X refresh came out, after a while, those features made their way to Model 3 and Y as well. There's an advantage to having the UIs be in one common look and feel, because then there's less engineering work that has to happen. So merging these branches at some point would allow for less complexity in their code base. And that also means that they have to merge their code base with less branches when they're upgrading it for FSD.
All right, Sawyer, any news today?
Yeah, definitely some news.
What do we got?
Elon did just respond to me. I posted about an hour ago that Tesla removed all their inventory discounts for all vehicle models in the US, excluding just the demo cars, because those always have discounts. And this is a big strategy change because dating back to 2022, we've had discounts, especially on the Model Y, for an inventory up to 10% in some cases, or in most cases even. And those are all gone now. And Elon just replied to me, "We are simplifying and streamlining the whole Tesla sales and delivery system. It has become too complex and inefficient." And then on top of that, Tesla has removed nearly all job listings in North America, the Middle East, Africa, most of the Europe as well. Germany still has some, but I think there's been like an 80 or 90% reduction. Zero openings in Canada. Australia still has some. China still has some. But clearly some big structural changes going on at Tesla.
He is back, baby. He's back. Wartime CEO.
And
Omar,
he
what's your
changed big symbolic turning point.
wartime CEO? What do you make of these changes, Meta?
ask, do you guys think that maybe they're going to have a new CEO compensation package, given that he's back, he's got some ambitious goals, and they probably just kind of rolled what he was supposed to get paid into the new picture?
Yeah, let's discuss that. And no hand is moved. All that's with you.
I mean, I don't think this has anything to do with the compensation package. Tesla is at a turning point. On one hand, the EV market is struggling, and Tesla saw a year-over-year sales climb. On the other hand, they're turning a corner with FSD. He's even necessarily thinking about his compensation package right now. I think he's just thinking about the future of the company, which obviously he has a huge stake in.
Sawyer, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there was some bloat in the company, and it had been a pretty long time since they made any material layoffs. And I get what Elon's saying. Every 5 years, you want to do some like structural changes and stuff. I think Elon has just changed his mind, his tune on some topics, including robotaxis and next gen vehicle, a little bit in recent months. That he's just changing or switching around priorities to some degree, and refocusing some teams. There was an article today from, I think it was the Late Post in China. I haven't posted it yet because I'm deciding whether or not to, if it's legit or not. But there were some programs that were struggling and not meeting goals and initiatives or timelines that they were supposed to. So I think Elon is just taking this opportunity to just do some fundamental changes at Tesla. And I don't know if the compensation package really has much to do with any of this. My guess is we're just gonna have to wait till that Delaware stuff gets worked out, and then maybe they'll do it. But I don't think that's really on Elon's mind.
Thank you.
So
Aisha? Yes, sorry, go ahead, Meta.
Yeah, to build on what Sawyer said, I think that it's strategic. So I agree. Like, we haven't seen any material layoffs like this. I mean, this is substantial. And with Elon's profile picture change, I think that it speaks to like him having his armor on. Like he's ready for battle. Like, I think that it's kind of a signal to everybody to let them know like he's got his war on.
All right. Meta?
yeah, I think it's fair to say that all the people that maybe don't see the signals that, okay, FSD is getting good, Elon's making pretty bold moves here, and he hasn't made these in the past, even though he's been very bullish on FSD. So a question I have for the folks is like, what do you think it takes for Elon to say, okay, now's the time?
I always like to answer that question. How am I supposed to answer that question? Like, what do you,
Is it just that the sales have done poorly and so that's why he's doing it, or do you think it's actually because he's seeing the software is improving and that's what's triggering it? Right? There's two competing arguments. One is
yeah,
the
I don't
narrative
know.
that the
I
company is
mean,
struggling.
there's also like there's not much of an evidence that he was disengaged, so to speak. Like he was focused on X, but at the same time, we know that he was taking meetings on Tesla. He was focused on Optimus. So, like, did actually something change? Can you prove that?
I mean, the layoffs are clearly a big change. The question is why now?
No, the layoffs have happened 2 years ago too, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying this is not par for the course. They do this regularly, but usually when they do it, there's a trigger, right? It's thought out. It's not a whim. I don't think it's a reaction to the Q1 earnings, but I'm just curious if you think there's a reason.
Omar, what do you think?
Well, I mean, just look at Elon's tweets from this morning. He says he's taking Tesla through a major transformation. They're making less money. They need to spend more money on AI. They need to reshift priorities. So this is what's happening. But, I think it's kind of been majorly over dramatized compared to some of the other things that are happening in the company. When it comes down to it, although I feel horrible for everybody who was affected, a 10% reduction in staff is not going to affect any of these teams to the point where they can't do their jobs.
Do you want to know? Michael says in the replies, this is why Elon's going all in now. And we posted Ashok's post. It is the beginning of the end. Ashok, sorry. Ashok, it is the beginning of the end. He says that's why Elon's going all in now. Texas Cyberbull. Texas Cyberbull, you may mute yourself and go ahead.
Possible that he's removing the inventory discounts to build up the network, build up a base cars for the Tesla network?
No, I think their strategy of aggressively cutting prices probably did not have the effect on demand as they thought it would. And I certainly thought that delivery growth would explode once they dropped prices 15 to 20%, but it just didn't as much. So I think they're taking a new approach here.
Machine's coming up, everybody. Brace yourselves. Machine. Machine, what do you think of the fact that Tesla removed all inventory discounts for all vehicle models in the US?
See, I thought that. So there was an error on Tesla's website last night in the U.S. where they posted 0.99% rates on the Model Y page. So I was like, I wonder if they're just getting rid of the inventory discounts and we'll replace it with just flow financing.
They also
I wonder if they're just getting rid of the inventory discounts and we'll replace it with just flow financing.
reduced the inventory discount on Model Y first before they got rid of it all.
No hands on machine.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in general, I'm skeptical that all of a sudden demand rationale not being that demand has gone up.
What would you like to see as evidence to believe that FSD has having an impact on order rates?
Um, pricing.
To do your homework ahead of time and state these questions, and we can roll. Like everybody else has their question answers ready, and yet we're waiting for 5 seconds.
They have
for
no
the answer.
answers. all your
That's 5
speakers
seconds
have
times 1,000 people in the audience. That's 5,000 seconds wasted.
all your speakers have no confidence in their statements. This is why when I predicted when the stock was at 200 and I predicted it's going down to 150, all these people were like, "Oh, I can't believe you would say that," and they were so upset. And now look, okay, now look, it basically happened. I closed my puts. I'm deciding what to do next. But honestly, this whole change in, trajectory here is really making me have to rethink exactly how I value everything. And also how I think the market's going to value everything and those timelines. And that's very complicated, I think. So I have to sit back for a while and really think about how I want to play this.
Okay. Charity trades, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I think it is such a lazy way of thinking to simply have this blanket kind of outlook that, oh, robotaxi is nowhere near ready. This is like the completely wrong way to think about how the rollout will actually occur. If anyone has spent time in the on-demand industry or the sharing economy industry, so anything related to companies like DoorDash, Uber, Lime, etc. I've spent about probably close to 8 years in the industry. This rollout will not be something where it's all or nothing, right? This is going to be jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And also, if you layer on top of that, you have to look at robotaxi in terms of its current ability and its expected ability over time to operate within different types of geographic areas. So think suburbs, for example. I drive version 12.3.4 every single day around Austin. I have yet to have an intervention. What does that tell me? That tells me that, okay, maybe in places like downtown Manhattan, for guess that's not by some kind of coincidence. This is how it's going to work. So, congratulations, you shorted the stock for a couple months and got lucky on that. That's fantastic. But you're not some kind of genius as a result. You're not like some kind of holier than thou individual who has all this insight that no one else does, right? You're actually just quite lucky. And this is coming from someone who trades way more options than you probably ever have. Okay, so I would encourage everyone to instead have the perspective of a little bit more nuance, of up-leveling the conversation as it pertains to robotaxi, because right now everyone is oversimplifying it and also kind of speaking from an area of insane bias, in my opinion.
Machine.
Well, first of all, he's wrong on the fact that I don't know what I'm talking about, since I actually do machine learning and data science and have spent time really trying to study exactly what it's going to take for the accuracy of these models to get to a high enough fidelity to actually not get in an accident at the same rate as humans. And I do agree with the speaker that that's going to vary over different situations, right? Different geographies. Absolutely. Now, whether or not they're going to get to the fidelity that they want to be able to deploy it in the suburbs of Austin, where there's just a lot of overweight, sweaty people because it's too humid, maybe. I don't disagree that that's possible. However, you still, to operate over a wide variety of ranges, even if it's all suburbs in the US, it's quite unlikely that Tesla at 300 miles per critical disengagement right now is anywhere near 100,000 miles per critical disengagement in the suburbs. And it's going to take
Just
increase, and that's based on actual information. And secondly, this guy commented to me and he said, "I'm somewhat jacked." No, I'm just jacked. I will squish you like a tomato and your little puts and calls.
Okay, just 1 second. We
Yes,
have somebody who says they work at Lucid Motors in their profile on the speaker board. First time speaker. Audio at Lucid Motors, deep into technology, HPC, AI, and other user experiences. So let's welcome Antoni Karalis. Go ahead, Antoni. You have to mute yourself so we can't hear your audio. I mean, unmute yourself. All right, Meta.
Machine just stated a couple of numbers, and I'm curious, how did you get to you need a critical disengagement for every 100,000 miles as measured by the FSD beta tracker? And how did you get to you need 1,000x more data?
Well, no, I said I didn't say 1,000x more data. I said 10x at minimum. And for the tracker, I'm assuming, and these assumptions obviously can vary, and I'm totally willing to change them, that half of the critical disengagements would relate to a possible accident. And so you would need to get that disengagement. Of
So I just want to give you some feedback here. What percentage of accidents do you think are just fender benders? Because from Waymo's safety reports, we can see that when they filter out accidents that were below 5 miles per hour, their safety reports super clean, like 0 accidents. So it's kind of like they launched the automotive vehicles with those accidents. Also, when we were in the space yesterday, I kind of went over the California AV app testing phase. So if you have somebody being forced to monitor it by law, then the requirement of disengagements per mile would arguably be lower because you have to have somebody sitting there watching it anyway.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. I don't know though if you're going to need to be doing that over using a massive number of cars. Do you think Tesla's going to deploy 50,000 cars with testers, or are we going to be able to count consumers as testers?
So the rules, as I understand them, I'm not a lawyer here, but as I understand it, is if it is, I think it's something like if it's doing dynamic driving for a sustained period of time, because the law is not defining anything really, then it's considered a level 4 or a vehicle that's in AV. So I think as long as the nag is there, it doesn't qualify. But in order to remove the nag, they would need to do it. But the law for the testing portion does make it clear that you must be an employee or a contractor or something along those lines. So I think they can only do it with employees. It also starts at like 10 to 100 vehicles, is I think basically what it is, but it's not limiting. It's like $5 per test vehicle they want to add.
But to your point about the type of accidents, I definitely think that's a big area to investigate and understand. I fully agree with you that the type of accident obviously matters. You know, do we really care much about fender benders? I mean, Tesla does from a cost perspective, but I already think, you know, based on some rudimentary analysis, that I don't think the cost would be a factor for fender benders to Tesla, as long as it's, you know, happening less than like 50,000 miles per instance. So I don't think that's going to be a limiting factor. So I agree with you. Yeah, you have to really kind of look at these different risks, and which I haven't done yet. So that's definitely a fair point.
Yeah, and so
Adrian? I don't want to turn into one-on-one because we have other people requesting as well. Charity?
Okay, thanks. You know, machine reminds me of like the Gary Black of machine learning, right? Like, you know, he understands so much about machine learning that all of a sudden the entire autopilot team is somehow inferior to his point of view. So let me at least kind of like illustrate one point which is really important to take away. So the types of things that he's bringing up, right, is very much you know, missing the forest for the trees, right? This is a classic kind of issue or type of fallacy. And you know, the most important thing to realize about all of this, if you zoom out, right, we just had a major breakthrough in end-to-end neural net and their training infrastructure and so forth. Okay, version 12 is a definitive proof of that. It is so much better than version 11. It's not even debatable. The key question will be the rate of improvement going forward. Now, who has access to that data and those trends and the earliest versions of newer models, newer versions? It's Elon and the team. So as soon as they begin the rollout, which will be, you know, not some kind of like, you know, 50,000 robotaxis in a bunch of suburbs. That's never how it's going to happen. How it's going to happen is it's going to be one jurisdiction at a time, and it's going to be with human supervised robotaxis, meaning there's going to be an employee behind the wheel utilizing FSD to chauffeur people around. That's how it's going to work. It's not going to be, there's not going to be some world where regulators are going to allow tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of self-driving vehicles operating on their own. That's just not how it works. Even with Cruise in San Francisco, if you look at their permit and rollout, they started in a specific geographic region that was outside of the downtown area of San Francisco with human supervised robotaxis before eventually being able to be authorized for like 10 vehicles and then 15 vehicles and then 20 vehicles of actually self-driving robotaxis.
Just one quick question for you. What's your experience in machine learning?
I don't have a background in machine learning.
Okay. Meta, yeah, machine.
yeah, machine has a really good understanding of machine learning. I would not go as far as to question that, honestly. Just want to make sure, like, even though me and him disagree, it's a very respectful disagreement whenever it happens. The other thing I just want to highlight, you're quoting how companies did these things. I encourage you to go read the actual text of the law. The law puts the onus on the companies to say what their plan is, and the fact that companies used a plan with people behind the wheel does not magically make it a requirement for subsequent companies. Waymo and Cruise had different approaches about hours, regions, and drivers.
I might not have machine learning background, but I have worked with local regulators to authorize autonomous robotic vehicles on public sidewalks. So I have gone through that process of speaking with state and city local officials. I understand the type of data they look for. And so I don't like, you know, I frankly just don't really agree with you. So
I think we got that point. I think you made that very clear. Machine and OS.
Yeah, I don't really even think there's necessarily a disagreement. I don't know. He's saying I'm missing the forest through the trees. What's the forest that eventually Tesla's going to have robotaxis? Did I say they weren't? I didn't say they weren't. I'm talking about timelines. And I think if you want to say the forest is, it's obvious that they're going to have robotaxis by the summer, then yeah, I disagree with you based on experience. Much like I disagreed with the idea that they were going to have robotaxis in 2017 when the first time they broke down the code showed that they were downsampling the images, number one, into a lower resolution, and they were only using 2 images at a time for comparison's sake to then evaluate and do their image detection and segmentation. And I said, there's no way in hell, because they're compute limited on hardware 2.5, that's going to be something that's going to be full self-driving, right? So it was a joke in 2017, no matter what the CEO said. And so now the CEO is indeed more bullish. So that is something to pay attention to. Now, is he more bullish because he's truly seen data that says it's on a trajectory for robotaxi level in a year or less or more? Exactly, I don't know. It's possible, but I'm going to take with that information also some Bayesian priors of looking at how models usually learn and how much time it takes, and be a little more conservative on timelines.
Wes.
Hey, Machine and Meta, what do you guys think is the reason that all signs are not supported yet in current V12? Do you think that they maybe didn't feed the training model all the advisory signs that you would encounter across the United States and Canada? Or what do you think is the reason?
I don't think they are trying to bring in OCR at the moment, and signs are extremely diverse. The cardinality of signs across the country is really, really high. So you kind of want to let the model see if it will be an emergent behavior first, is my guess.
Aisha.
I think it's a vast tapestry to overcome, and I'm reticent to ask the question. Maybe this is for a machine, but for the room, do you think it was a mistake not to pursue a Tesla commercial? And if it was pursued, what would that look like now?
Yeah, whenever you ask machine a difficult question, he just leaves. So that's just what happened. Adrian, would you like to take that question?
Well, I can't take that question, but Meta, what I want to ask you, so, obviously I've made the case before, if more cars use FSD, I have more diverse data set. Wouldn't these small details, such as signs, just emerge? I mean, if it can pay attention to things that are crossing a road, such as a chicken, it doesn't know what a chicken is, it just knows it's supposed to stop when there is chicken in the road. So wouldn't it stand to reason that in some conditions, if it sees these signs, it just behaves a certain way, much like any human would?
That's true for the cases where the signs are logical. It's not going to be great for cases where it's a confusing sign, even for humans.
Ah. So how do we get past that one?
So you normally go after the largest clusters first, right? So if you can't make right turns without curbing your wheels, if you can't deal with double lanes and all those kinds of things, those are probably higher frequency instances. Whereas the signs are geolocated in a single area. It's really easy when you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, we couldn't tackle certain signs. Great. We can just geofence those particular areas and say, just don't go there. I know Tesla keeps saying they're not going to geofence, but the SAE rule things are not only are they a legal requirement for many laws, they're actually well thought out by engineers. And I think that Tesla will follow that to some degree at some point. They may not call it that, but I think there will be some kind of geofencing.
Machine.
I'm sorry, what was Aicha's question?
Aisha.
Asya, me?
Yep.
Well, overall, I think we're trying to imbue investor confidence. So my thought, and I'm reticent to say it, is if we were to pursue a Tesla commercial, what would that look like now? I have ideas, but I'd like yours.
Well, thank you. I don't know why you'd ask me about commercials. Is it because I am the only one who starred in a commercial on this basis? That
I
actually is true.
actually didn't know that.
Yeah, that was a Swedish poker gambling commercial 20 years ago. I won't get into more detail, but suffice to say, I'm totally incompetent with respect to commercials. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I
Did the
do want to focus
recruiter
on it.
look at your profile and then not contact you back for the commercial?
Nice thing. Good job.
Drop your LinkedIn.
Yeah, for those of you who are in the audience and didn't get that joke, you should be coming to the space every day. All right. I want to refocus the conversation on that technical. Let's go back to that technical discussion. So, Meta, what else? What other kind of challenges do you see ahead for FSD development, and how does that jive with your May level 4 prediction?
So there's a reason why I always level 4, not level 5, and that's because I anticipate that they will have to at some point geocode, geofence things. Part of the way I was reasoning about it was if you look at the timeline for Waymo and how well Waymo's doing, they just expanded to Atlanta today. That adds pressure to Tesla to have to actually possibly make some compromises, like not trying to go for the entire country all at once and say, okay, if we were to geofence it, if we want to ship something tomorrow, what areas could we actually ship it? Could we actually find some areas where we could go ahead and support it today? So I think that's one factor. The other factor is if you, depending on your assumptions, if you assume that fender benders are okay because you're gonna have to have somebody monitoring the vehicle anyway, right? And fender benders are small cost, I would say, of accelerating your learning curve here. If fender benders represent, say, 3/4 of accidents, I don't know. I don't know if somebody has some data. I don't have actually data. I'm just assuming somewhere between 70 and 80%. If it's 3/4 of accidents, then what does the distribution of mileage come down to? Maybe you don't need to have a disengagement every 165,000 miles. Maybe it's closer to 10,000 or 20,000 miles. Things start to look very different. If you start geofencing it, then you say, okay, for like if on the FSC beta tracker we saw like the percentiles, right? If you could say for the 90th percentile or the 99th percentile, what's a region, the smallest region where things are working that we could actually launch something or start testing something? It's just a matter of motivation, I would say, at this point. So it could be with the new refocusing that Elon's doing, they might say, you know what, it's time to apply for the permit and start going through that process now. Because that time, it does take time, and they have to have employees behind the wheel for a period of time. And you don't have to be perfect when you start the process.
Wes agrees with you, it sounds like. What are the steps involved in geofencing? Let's say, so you apply locally to a regulator. And then what about the kind of software changes that need to be done so that the car only works as a robotaxi in that area? And pick any city you want, let's say San Francisco. How difficult is that? And does that really get us closer to our end goal of kind of national service? Or does it delay it a little bit further?
I would argue it gets you closer, right? Obviously, this is a place where I have a disagreement maybe with the way Tesla has generally spoken about it. Or maybe there's internally, they're thinking about it differently. But if you geofenced in San Francisco, what you would do is you would say maybe one, they've built a 3D version of San Francisco. Two, you build a road roughness equivalent of where all the disengagements happening at all the different intersections. You pull that all up into a map. And then when you do your routing, you just avoid those intersections. This means now you've split your problem space into two. You've got persistent issues and you've got dynamic issues. You can't get away from the dynamic issues with geofencing. So this then says, look at all the clusters that remain that are all dynamic issues and just focus on those. So as you get to the point in the March of Nines where now the most obvious things are being addressed, it comes a time where you say, okay, it's time to put employees behind the wheels, have people who can actually speak to exactly why the disengagement occurred so that we can start nailing those things down. And I think that naturally is probably the way you have to go. And starting that process, you only want to start it when, you know, you're ready, I guess, right? Like there's no point in putting a bunch of vehicles behind the test fleet, and then you know that there's a takeover every few miles, and
Okay, how many
and it's
cars do you think we need for that testing in a city, in a given city?
less than 100 per city.
Okay, 100 people per city, and we know they're hiring in a bunch of cities, right? So I think what was the number of cities, was like 10 or something, or a dozen.
Yep.
So that's about 1,000 employees.
For
And how
prototype
long do we need
vehicles.
to?
Yeah.
How long do you think we need to collect data for this? I mean, I guess it depends on how the software is performing, but
Yeah. So that's more of the challenge. The reality is, as soon as the dynamic driving problems are solved, theoretically they can get a permit for the geographies in which they have solved it and convince themselves they've solved it. Then they can start focusing on expanding the geographies where they haven't solved the dynamic driving issues. But as soon as they expand to other areas, most likely the approach that Tesla's using will scale, right? So they can go ahead and say, okay, we're expanding to more geographies. And at some point, now all the static issues have gone away, and it's in the entire country.
Omar, what do you think about this plan?
I don't think anybody really has wrapped their head around what's happening here. I don't think there's going to be any geofencing. I don't think it's going to be any city. It's just going to be able to drive anywhere from a technical perspective. Now, of course, there could be different regulations on where it's allowed and where it's not allowed, and there may be permitting processes. But we have people across the country right now having it do their drives for them in Mississippi, in Georgia, in California. You see them share the same story. I got in my car, I told it where to take me. It took me there without interventions. That's what this technology is doing today. Okay. Now, people are so stuck in the old way of thinking because we had FSD for a few years and people have kind of internalized that rate of improvement. And they're thinking, okay, well, we're so far away, this isn't going to happen. And there's a concern among investors that Elon is betting the entire company on FSD. This is going to turn out to be a mistake. FSD is not going to work or it's not going to be ready. And the company won't be able to grow as a result. So, I think this is kind of a misguided fear on two levels. One is that they don't actually realize how rapidly FSD is advancing in its performance. And two, they're kind of overestimating the risk of it blowing up in Tesla's face as opposed to the risk of not investing in it, right? Would
Mhm.
you rather have a robo taxi too early or too late?
Right.
Tesla is at a point now where they need to be the dominant player in this market. If Tesla becomes the dominant player in the robo taxi market, they'll be worth, 10 times more. If they're not, they could lose, most of their value.
Meta.
First off, I'm happy to know I'm not the most bullish person in the space. But I would disagree that it's just going to turn on everywhere all at once. There's nothing fundamentally different from the way the planner's being built by Tesla from a technology standpoint than the way Waymo has built it. And they published their papers in 2020. So, we can go look at those papers and see what they did. The only key difference is they did it with two models as opposed to one combined model, but I don't see any technical reason why that would change anything. So I strongly think that the diversity of problems out there, it's possible. Tesla says we're not going to go and turn on robotaxi until we've solved it absolutely every single place in the country. But then I would argue they could have launched a lot earlier and had profitable services in many areas of the country before they solve the last stop sign that they're struggling with.
Adrian.
I'll pass to Omar first. I feel like he's got priority.
It's already doing intervention-free drives across the country. This is a technology where it just looks at the road, and it can drive. People keep talking about this like it's some future thing, but it's been doing all my driving for the last 4 years almost at this point. And with FSD 12, it can just do it without me touching anything most of the time across the country. I don't think people realize how good it is even is on this early version of 12.3. 12.3.4 in particular, it's so ironed out compared to the other builds. It just fixed a lot of the weird quirks. And this is just the beginning. Okay, you have to realize internally they're already testing 12.4 and 12.5. 12.4 adds smart summon. It adds a much stronger version of the model. It adds the ability to do reverse. It's starting to get exceedingly rare to see interventions of any kind. Then, before 12.3.4 came out, I was kind of thinking, there is still something missing. They kind of need to add like a Grok or an OpenAI vision type capability, I think, to this. But then I tried 12.3.4 and I was just blown away by how human-like it was. And I said, you know what? I may have underestimated the rate of improvement in 12. I literally have not had a disengagement yet on 12.3.4. Now, if you think about the fact that this is a hardware 3 only model, they haven't even tapped into the power of hardware 4 yet. I think they're going to start bringing some of these Grok vision capabilities in, give it some background understanding of the world. People who are trying it are saying it's smoother than Waymo, it's more natural than Waymo. It's starting to leapfrog it in many ways. So you have an existence proof that people are using it across the country, they're refining it across the country, and I think the effect on sales is going to be immediate. I think this is part of how they're reconfiguring their pricing strategy. This doesn't depend on autonomy working. If autonomy takes a little longer than expected, there's no problem for their business. People can continue to use the software. But once it's good enough, it'll go from having a human supervisor in the car intervening manually to having remote interventions for the rare times when the system does need some help figuring out what to do.
Thank you. As a reminder, we have a bunch of people requesting to speak. If we don't get to you, so this is a very focused technical discussion. If we don't get to you, just leave a reply with your question. If I say a good reply, I'll bring you up. Adrian, go ahead.
No, you ultimate again. This is good.
I not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but like if you took the Waymo software today as it is, right? And we could argue about HD maps and how long it takes to build HD maps. Let's say it takes them a week or 2 weeks to drive around with enough cars and build the HD map. Let's say that's done. They could expand to every single city just as well, assuming they had the hardware, right? So let's focus on the software side of the conversation. There's nothing that is significantly different about the planning stack that Tesla's built versus the way Waymo has built it. They're both built on similar technology. So I don't think we should conclude that Waymo is going to necessarily be way dumber, and there's a reason why, they're doing geofencing is really dumb. I think the geofencing is a way to get a product launched faster, and it would make sense for Tesla to consider that, especially because once you've done the geofence, you separated the problem into now you can start handling the downstream problems. Like, okay, what are the dynamic issues that come up? How do we deal with law enforcement? How do we deal with passengers in the vehicle? And as you're solving those problems and continuing to solve the rest of the problems that are static, you can expand at a faster rate than Waymo. You also have the vehicles already.
Okay, no hands mode. No hands mode. Adrian.
Yeah, so Meta, wouldn't it necessarily confuse the AI itself to have something like what Omar suggested, to actually have Grok Vision tell it what certain things are? Like, could there perhaps be a way to move around this? Because we know that if you are taking LiDAR, for instance, to help guide an AI system, it tends to confuse the system. As per, I think, Tesla AI, they were the ones who stated this. Do you think that's the case? And perhaps, how could we solve this if that were?
I don't think that's true. I know sometimes Tesla says things that they back up or back down from, but they don't always maybe correct the record. They did sensor fusion for radar for a long time. They did sensor fusion for OS, for other sensors as well. But the key thing here is Waymo works. We can see it's working. They use lidars. They do sensor fusion. The key difference is Waymo built a perception stack using transformers a lot earlier than Tesla switched over. And Tesla switched over for perception, but they didn't switch over for planner. Now that they've switched over to planner, you could argue all the other sensors could have been fused, right? Transformers are pretty good at handling sensor fusion because the core thing is they learn what to attend to. So if in certain dynamic situations you should listen to one sensor versus another sensor, that deep reasoning that you have to do is quite similar to if a car is coming and I'm trying to transfer, make a, Chuck's left, should I go or not go? Should I have my rear end sticking out or not sticking out? All those trade-off choices in deep reasoning are quite similar to which sensor to listen to.
I think Waymo fundamentally is a failure. Waymo started in 2009. It's 2024. It's been 15 years, and they've launched in one city. It's simply not good enough. And I love using it. I love being in a driverless car. I love driving in Cruise too before it got shut down. But you look at their operating structure, they're burning billions of dollars. For every car, there's a van following it with two people. So that if there's a problem, the one guy can get out of the van and the other guy can drive the van and they can go get the car. And that's their form of interventions, right? You can see videos on YouTube. I've posted, for example, a video. You can see how they manually intervene in a Waymo. It's very rare, but they have to do it. So they have to staff a couple of people. Then there's another person in the call center. Then there's other supporting staff. People who are cleaning the car, other things. Essentially, they've gone from having, one driver per car who's doing everything to having multiple drivers per car. And it's amazing overall, of course, to have a driverless car, but the driving is robotic. It is missing something that allows it to truly drive in the real world naturally. And I think what that thing is that it's missing is large scale data collection, millions of clips, and and tons of training compute to produce, the model that Tesla's produced. And that they've done it in a way that I think is scalable. There's no maps required. There's no, I've seen Waymo make map issues. It thinks there's a stop sign there it isn't. Vision, you can just see it for yourself driving Waymo and driving Tesla. This is the breakthrough that was needed, I think, to really make self-driving scale.
Meta, then Adrian.
Omar, with all due respect, you can't say Waymo's a failure from a technical standpoint when it's operating without humans behind the wheel in at least two cities. You said one city, but we know it's in Arizona and San Francisco, right? So it is operating. We can debate the business model. We can debate the financials, or maybe not the soundest, but from a technical standpoint, from a software standpoint, it's working. So I don't think we can say that's a failure. Similarly, if you're going to say timelines, Tesla clearly took a lot of wrong turns and they took a lot longer to get here. So I don't think it's a fair comparison. And the last thing I would say is on the data side, just keep in mind, there are a lot of Tesla owners who are going to sit in a Waymo and then sit in their car and they're going to suffer placebo effects and confirmation biases in their brains and feel one thing is better than the other. However, I have experienced both as well. They're both good. I would not say Waymo's robotic, right? Waymo's a really good example. It works. And I think it's a good idea for Tesla enthusiasts to look at it like the race has started. Maybe this is one of the things kicking off war mode, but we can't get complacent. Tesla will get lapped at some point if they don't make progress.
Look,
Adrian.
I'm not trying to get complacent. I'm just saying objectively, it has not worked. I think people get so lost in this discussion that they forget about what we're talking about here. We're talking about one of the most major technological shifts of our lifetime, something that's been talked about in science fiction for a long time and is now starting to become real. Something that, when they talk about economic history, is going to be up there with industrial production and computers in terms of its impact on the world. This technology is coming and it's going to hit the world like a slap on the face. And what we're talking about here is really computers being able to move around the world on their own. We're talking about a world where people don't drive. They call a car, it picks them up. They don't, they can ship things instantly. They go outside, they give the package to the robot, it goes and takes it where it's supposed to go. And that this is a mass market, easily accessible thing all over the world. The magnitude of this transition we're talking the entire world, 7 billion people, is a massive, massive shift that is going to play out over years and years across the world. And we are nowhere yet. Okay, Waymo's in Chandler, Arizona. In LA and San Francisco, you need an invite. They have not, scaled it at all. Let's recognize, I think where we are in this whole transition. So what Waymo has done is they've proved that it works. They prove you can have driverless cars, and I take it day or night, rain or sunshine, it just works anywhere in San Francisco. And I love Waymo. But now the question is, how do we mass produce millions of these things and actually change the world? How do we actually make this real? And that's why I'm excited about Tesla. I don't think that I'm biased for Tesla. I use both of these products, and Tesla is the one that I can actually take anywhere. It can take me on a trip. I can use it anywhere. If you just look at the miles I've done in Tesla, thousands and thousands of miles compared to Waymo, I can barely use Waymo. It's expensive. Tesla is a product that I can actually use and is exciting and is available today. So that's kind of why I feel a lot more optimistic about their approach.
West and Adrian.
Yeah, I would generally agree with Omar and Meta. I think it's important to realize that they still have not reduced their energy needs at the edge. So they still have in the vehicle, and the build out of those cars, and they haven't gotten information maps yet, which I don't understand why they haven't gone away from, and specifically also gone away from, they would realize that that's possible. So that's why I don't think that Waymo has a scalable solution. They do have a solution for Chandler. I get that. But they don't really have a solution that can easily scale to other cities. And we just see this playing out right now. I wish they would pursue a different path, but that's how I feel.
I yield to Meta.
Yeah,
Okay, sounds like Adrian just wants to hear the conversation, and then Adrian, feel free to jump in whenever you want. And let's do no hands mode. I think we have a really strong speaker board. That's why I'm keeping the people requesting to speak kind of out for now. Request to speak only if you have previous experience in machine learning, AI, autonomous driving, and you have a unique perspective. Otherwise, just leave a reply. I'm monitoring the replies, and if I see something valuable, I'll bring you up. Meta?
yeah, like I think it's a unfair metric when we say they haven't reduced their energy needs, right? Back in the early days for Waymos, people would complain that they had a data center in the back of the vehicle, and now there isn't one there. It makes sense to have a lot of compute. It's a valid strategy from a technical standpoint to say, I'm going to overbuild the hardware. I'm going to put a lot of compute in the vehicle. Every time these prototype vehicles, again, there's only like tens to hundreds of these, right? Every time these vehicles are driving around, it's as if you drive that intersection 5 times with 5 different models or more. you have all these different sensors. You can actually have some of the models ablating the sensors and only using the cameras. Just because the sensors are on the vehicle doesn't mean you're dependent on those sensors. However, until you've solved the dynamic problems in every situation, highway, city, rain, different kinds of cities, it doesn't make sense to remove those sensors unless you're going to say, it's time to now flip the switch. We're very confident. We know exactly what sensors we need to keep. Let's make a new car with just those sensors and buy tons of cars. So like Tesla's going to flip a switch and turn the software on for all the cars, there's a moment where Waymo theoretically will flip a switch and order a ton of cars. At that point in time, it would be, way too late for, I think, Tesla to compete, because we're basically arguing that no Chinese competitor that can make cars or others will be able to deliver the vehicles. It's possible, but I don't think that's a place to get complacent.
Charity.
I have a quick question for you guys, especially those with backgrounds in machine learning, like Machine. What would be the best way to track the rate of improvement as we're assessing version 12.3.4 relative to the upcoming newer versions? How would you suggest that the rest of us be able to keep a tabs on the rate of improvement? If there's any quantitative kind of approaches or data sources that you guys frequent, and this is to Meta or Machine.
Are you daydreaming about Machine? Because he's not here right now.
I see him as a speaker too, by the way.
Oh, I see him as a speaker.
Really? Okay. Never mind. It's just
I was
me.
yielding to him because I see him as a speaker and his mic was off.
No, he's out. I don't know why you're saying this.
The data,
Anyway,
the only public data to track that I think is of high value, even with all of the problems that it has, is the FSD beta tracker, right? You can track anecdotes, you can track what other people are saying, but I think the only ways to really even make that data richer is if you can go ahead and segment that data by region, which it does allow. You have to go into the other dashboards, but it doesn't allow you to do percentiles or show the standard deviations on a lot of the graphs. And Elias has said he's going to be bringing that. So once that's there, I think that would be the best source of data we have. Other than that, there's not a lot of public data. Tesla has the data, and it's their choice if they wish to release it.
Awesome, thanks. And just in regards to the, it's teslafsdtracker.com is what you're referring to, I believe. Is this well known by a lot of folks? Like, is there any way to see like how many drivers exactly are submitting data? And more importantly, how can we get the word out, right, to the rest of the Tesla community to help contribute data as well from their FSD beta usage? Because I actually didn't know about this and I would love to help contribute.
There's other tabs on that dashboard that show user data. So if you go on that dashboard, don't just stop on the first page. There's a bunch of other dashboards. There's like 8 or 9 dashboards you can dig into.
Oh, I see it at the bottom. Yep, thank you.
West, no hands mode. Wes.
Dude, I thought it was just me. I couldn't hear him.
I don't think he can hear you.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, wow.
Well, Meta, can you call on Wes?
Wes, can you hear me? You can go.
Oh, got it. I can hear you now. I must have dropped out for a second. Question for you. What would it take for you to think that Waymo's path is not good?
From an engineering standpoint or a business standpoint?
Yeah, technically. Well, business as well, because you can't really have one without the other.
Exactly.
You can definitely have one without the other, right?
It's a science
Why
project.
why would you say that?
Because a business strategy involves the competition and the finances. A technical thing, given enough time, you can still achieve your goals. Then it's just a matter of, okay, maybe it wasn't high enough margins. Maybe the other company did it better. That's a different conversation, because the technical side on the hardware manufacturing, Tesla's got the advantage, but BYD's doing a good job too. So if you play fantasy business here and you were to combine BYD and Waymo and you got rid of the foreign country manufactured risk, yeah, I think that Waymo BYD combination is the biggest threat to Tesla right now.
How much would let's kind of explore that a little bit. How much?
So you're
Yeah,
if Waymo let's say something crazy like it's $1 million.
It's really hard to hear.
Yeah,
you.
Wes is totally glitching. Yeah.
Yay, internet.
You were clear at the very end. If you want to try now.
Sorry. real quick. Sorry about that. I had to move around the house. So you're saying that hypothetically, like if they solve for FSD with a vehicle that costs them $1 million, hypothetically, it's something crazy, million per vehicle, but they solved it. You think that's still business viable?
No,
That's a viable product?
those are completely not what I'm saying. So engineering does involve finances. The key difference is we keep saying that's like saying the first 10 phones that were manufactured by Apple each cost $1 million each, but the final product is $1,000, right? We know,
we're talking past each other.
yeah. So the first few vehicles have prototype hardware on them that does not have to be in the final product.
I understand. It's just, what would it take for you to think that the business isn't viable, with their current approach? I feel like no matter what happens, you're going to be positive about it. So I'm trying to understand the other side. Play devil's advocate, if you could.
Yeah. If we exclude Tesla from the equation and you say there's infinite time, Waymo's approach will eventually solve it. So the thing that makes me
but we're okay.
So the thing that would make me negative on
You're
Waymo,
taking an
is seeing
interesting approach.
Tesla push faster.
So you're saying no matter what, their approach is good until it's not.
No, I'm saying their approach is good until there's somebody who can make vehicles for cheaper, who also has the software competing with them.
All right, let me ask you a question,
I would say
Meta.
2 years. 2 years is probably the time frame for Tesla at this point.
Okay, Meta, let me ask you a question. For Waymo to license this technology to say BYD, going off of that fantasy, how much hardware cost would be added to each BYD car, and what's the timeline?
So Tesla's already proven convincingly that you don't need LiDAR. HD maps are not that hard to add, so I don't think there's a cost factor there. So let's say tomorrow Waymo goes along and says, okay, of the 21 sensors, of the LiDAR, we've gotten it down. And they go to Geely, which they have a contract with, and they say, manufacture these cars in the following way. BYD probably makes those cars, and the additional cost is probably very comparable to the additional sensor costs that we see with Tesla, maybe 50% more.
Omar?
I mean, BYD already has a deal with Geely. They announced years ago to make vehicles. So, I just did some rough math in my head. I think we need probably at least 118 million robotaxis to fill, the world's demand and move global transportation to robotaxis. So we basically need to make a shit ton of cars. If we, let's say Tesla was producing 20 million cars a year, it would take them, 6 years to fill the demand. So, I think probably what I want to see from Waymo as the next milestone to know that they're serious is I want to see them achieve 1 million monthly active users. If they can say we have 1 million users that are using our service every month, then they're a serious player. Right now, I think they're still pretty low scale. And really what we need to see from them ultimately is building millions and millions of robotaxis and putting them into service and making money on them.
They just announced 3 more cities today. Did you see it 5 hours ago?
Not really, though. So you have to really peel back the layers of these announcements. because they announce all these cities, but even in LA and San Francisco where they're live, you need an invite. In these cities like Atlanta, they're not even saying that they're going to open it up for invites. They just say they're starting to map the cities. That's it.
So the
So, it's a good start, obviously. You want to map it before you go live there. But they're really only open to the public in one city in the world, which is the Phoenix metro area.
the difference here is they've generally gone one city at a time. They're now launching 3 cities in parallel, right? So that does signal some level of confidence. Next thing we would see is maybe they launch in 5 to 10 more cities in parallel. At which point, the next announcement we'd expect to see is a huge order of vehicles.
Right. But that hasn't really happened. I mean, I had to basically beg them forever to get an invite in San Francisco. And even then, I can't call one in LA, right? The fundamental issue is I can call a Uber in 2 minutes, but if I want to call a Waymo, it could take anywhere from 8 minutes to 14 minutes, maybe, 3, 4 minutes if I'm lucky. But you generally have a much longer wait time. Now, if you were to open this up to the public so that it wasn't invite only, the wait times would continue to skyrocket, which is why they have to make it invite only. So you have a basic competitive problem with how do you deliver a wait time that is competitive to a human driven Uber? If you can't, people will get the human driven Uber, even if it's a little more expensive, because they don't want to wait 14 minutes when there's a car 2 minutes away. So just to deliver a competitive product, it's not enough for the technology to be perfect, human level or above. You need to actually supply the cars that are going to be near the consumer ultimately when they want it.
Adrian.
I really like the fact that you brought up worldwide adoption, and of course, reducing wait times with mass. But there's one small problem with worldwide adoption for this. Like, you'd have to limit it to the US first with FSD, because like the roads elsewhere are different. For instance, the most abstract of the differences being that you'd have to drive on the other side of the road, but also the behavior of humans is a little different. That's another thing that's a massive problem that's always overseen. Like, for instance, in third world countries, or developing countries even, people tend to drive in a more rude fashion. And even then, they tend to use, say, for instance, the ability to honk a lot more often, not to voice dissatisfaction with a particular maneuver of another driver, but they're saying, hey, I'm here, they're communicating, right? So that's another interesting thing where FSD would have struggles with, right? And of course, the roads being structurally different. So this kind of like goes to meta. If you wanted to solve for something such as this, does fine-tuning, say, the FSD model for USA kind of solve this, or would you have to just essentially create a entirely new version based somewhat on the existing FSD thing?
Fine-tuning is perfect for those particular scenarios. You can kind of think of it like adults who learn a language after they've been, adults learning a language. There's still some subvocalization that occurs in the other language, but over time it goes away. So that's basically what fine-tuning is. You can think of it like that. With respect to the Waymo conversation, I think we've always gone into circles in this, and the argument always goes back to, well, they don't have a lot of cars, and I think that's a unfair argument, because people could say the same thing about Tesla and say, well, they have a human behind the wheel, well, they have a nag. It's unfair to compare on a on a on a ruler that the companies are not targeting. Tesla's not targeting removing people from the vehicle before they've gotten the software perfect everywhere. Waymo's not targeting making more vehicles until they've got the software perfect everywhere. They're just two different approaches.
Derek.
Yeah, I believe that the data from the geofencing will have negative hallucinations from different edge cases. I mean, you would have to then combine, 50, 300 models across the country into one, and it's just going to have major confusion for the AI.
There's a big assumption that they're doing a lot of different models. There's no evidence that they're doing different models, right? The papers talk about one model everywhere, but they have many different versions of the same model, as you do when you're experimenting and testing.
Derek.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of complexity. You know, if Tesla goes in the geofencing route, I feel like it's just going to have a lot of different confusion up the whole stack.
Okay, but so you said that, and then Meta responded. What's your response to his response?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a user, but I'm not, you know, an AI god of any sort.
Okay.
But I really do believe that, you know, they're focused on camera models.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, I don't think geofencing would be a problem whatsoever because I mean it's just basically saying here a car don't go in this general direction. Just basically makes it navigationally off limits. I don't think it actually alters anything about the model itself. You're just inverse affecting the performance of the model by saying don't go into these high complexity areas. I mean, if you look at FSD, for instance, right now, some of the engagements is actually kind of fascinating. So I was in an Uber. They were using FSD, and they did a disengagement not because FSD didn't perform well, but because it took a route which was less complex and would have taken more time. So the only this is another interesting thing about the disengagements, why the number of disengagements using that as a quality metric is, I think, extremely inaccurate. This is why Gordon Johnson has such a bearish case and why he justifies it to himself, but doesn't actually match up to reality. But if you look at the map performance, no, I don't think so. No. Geofencing should not have any negative impact whatsoever, except for, of course, time. But that's the only thing I could imagine. Like, correct me if I'm wrong.
Harry, looks like Meta agrees with you, Adrian.
So software aside, have we found any evidence that Waymo can actually scale their distribution? I mean, the only statistics I've seen is that it costs approximately $300,000 to outfit each of their Waymo vans. Is there any new kind of data or evidence around whether or not, even if their software was on par, that they'd be able to scale? Because that's
Yeah, I mean, I think Meta is assuming that Waymo will be able to remove sensors. And to my knowledge, they've done that once in the last 4 years. Why they removed one LiDAR, right, Meta?
Yes, they removed a LiDAR, but that's not, so it's like saying, why haven't they removed any sensors yet? Well, it's very clear. They say, we're going to take the prototype vehicles, we're going to roll it out, we're going to accomplish our March of Nines, and then we're going to mass produce the hardware. It's just a different approach. One, you could argue that is less capital intensive if you got the hardware wrong. Let's say, I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say you found out that you actually need to put a camera on the front edge of the car. Waymo can learn that at a cheaper cost than having to replace their entire fleet or not being able to turn on the vehicles that they've already manufactured. Tesla's approach is more sound from a business standpoint because they can sell these cars and at least they've sold an ADAS that is working. But if we're just comparing it to robotaxi, they're two different approaches and they carry different risks.
Yeah, but that doesn't really address what I was really talking about, because LiDAR is just one component. When you actually think about the actual vehicle, you also need to manufacture that at relative scales. So the real question is, who would Waymo partner with, and what would be their cost of production? Because in a robotaxi price war, the lowest cost of production wins, right? So
yeah, we've seen them partner with Jaguar, and I believe Geely has been spoken about. I don't know if I've seen any of those cars myself. And I think the basic idea here is their approach is not vehicle dependent, just like Tesla's model is not vehicle dependent. You can swap a 3 for a Y, for an S, for an X. There's no reason to assume these are going to be different.
Okay, back to the technical discussion. Meta, so we talked yesterday, or was it the day before, about Tesla not counting FSD miles on the highway. The highway is not yet V12. That's your understanding, right?
I conceded in that space that I'm probably wrong.
Okay, so they are counting FSD miles, but
Yeah,
is it the end-to-end neural network architecture that's functioning on the highways today?
that is not my understanding. I think the end-to-end network is only in the cities, per their release notes being very specific and saying city stack. However, if we look at the graph and we see the mileage from before V12, obviously that had to be including highway, is my guess. If that graph is only including city miles, the second they turn on highway, it's going to explode.
Okay, so what's your technical understanding of why they haven't turned it on the highway just yet? Is it the same reason or similar reason that Waymo took years to get from city streets to the highway?
That's my assumption as well. The risk of an end-to-end network making a mistake in high-speed situations is much higher. So you have to have higher testing rigor.
So then, kind of like, what would you assume as the timeline? Do you think it's going to take Tesla as well years, or do you think because Tesla already has so many cars on the roads traveling the highways, it's going to take less time for Tesla to do?
I think because Tesla already built a model, whether it's heuristic based or not, that works relatively well, that serves as a teacher model, so they can actually get their foundational stack to a similar level much faster than Waymo, because they have the data and they already have an example. They also have the advantage of reading papers that are published, right? So that they don't have to implement all the errors and have as messy of a code base. So most engineers know this. If you implement something and you implement it again the second time is always more efficient.
Okay, great. Any other points from the speaker board? Any questions for Meta, Wes, Omar, Adrian? Please request to speak.
I actually have to drop here shortly.
Dang. Yeah, one thing, Omar, it's kind of a thing with the double-edged sword when it comes to edge cases. Have you taken it into environments that are exceedingly complex and have achieved zero intervention drives there, or has it mainly just been with inside of the city and such?
Yes, it can do really complex things. Cities, urban areas, suburban areas, you name it. You just tell it where you want it to go, and it takes you there smoothly. It's pretty incredible what this release can do. And this is nothing compared to what the next release is going to be capable of. It'll reverse to get out of tight spots. It'll be able to drive driverlessly in parking lots. The progress is showing no signs of stopping, and they haven't even scratched the surface of what they can do with hardware 4 yet. Then, really, the Grok vision and GPT vision and everything we've seen with these sort of vision transformer models, it really seems like that's the next step in allowing it to understand the context between situations in a way that would allow it to make truly human decisions, even in some very strange sort of edge case environments.
All right, Omar, we have a question for you on YouTube Live. Would you like to comment on why the Cybertruck? And we can always go back to FSD if folks have questions or points. But about the Cybertruck production pause, there's a lot of FUD circling around.
Yeah, there's no production pause that I'm aware of, but there is a pause on deliveries. I was contacted over the weekend by some customers who were preparing to take delivery of their Cybertruck, and they were unfortunately alerted that there was a pause on deliveries for 7 days while they worked out an issue with the accelerator pedal. So I'm not sure about the nature of that issue. I haven't had any problems with the accelerator pedal or anything like that on my Cybertruck. So it's probably a relatively rare occurrence. I think maybe part of it could snap off or something. So I'm sure it's something that they'll resolve relatively quickly and get back to delivering them. But definitely frustrating for the customers who were ready to take delivery. The Cybertruck is just an incredible vehicle to drive around. There's a lot of really great technology in them. There has been a few hiccups here and there with them ramping up the production of a new vehicle, but I'm sure they'll have all the kinks worked out and everything resolved soon. Another issue was with the wheels. The wheel covers were kind of rubbing up against the tires and causing some wear and tear there. They had to stop delivering the cars with wheel caps. So definitely some issues, not really great, but I'm sure they'll be resolved and they'll continue deliveries very soon if they haven't already.
Adrian.
Yeah, wasn't the accelerator pedal problem the cover on top, which was not glued on properly, which then slid off when you would accelerate, then jamming the pedal brakes? Did I lag out?
You broke up there a little bit. Omar, did you catch that?
I think he said something about the cover on top of the accelerator pedal breaking off. I did kind of see something about that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear you now.
Yeah, so so there's a cover on the accelerator paddle, and what happens is sometimes it tends to slip off, and there was one video where in fact the guy was complaining about this, where he pushed down the I absolutely love my telecom company, you know that? You know, get into a room with their CEO, I'm going to tell them that one of their prime achievements was a faulty internet connection, or I was having a conversation with the richest man on the planet, because that was exactly the case. Like, wow. Anyways, yeah, back to the accelerator pedal. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Yeah, so it would slip. It's not fixed properly, and so it would slip off when you were to push it all the way down, then jamming the pedal in place, thereby effectively not being able to decelerate the car. So you can't stop the car. If you press the brake, it just disengages the acceleration. But still, it's kind of a problem, because if you have a Cybertruck on 100% acceleration and you're not able to stop it when you're letting go of the gas, when you're letting go of the pedal, that's going to be a bit of a freaky experience. So that's what happened there, according to this guy's video. Just the cover slips off and jammed it in place, and that obviously caused a bit of a scare. So I guess it's what they're fixing now.
Thank you. Omar, I pinned at the top Jim Fan's post about Tesla FSD V13. He's, I guess, kind of speculating. Next version of FSD, he's saying, will likely be grokking language tokens. What excites him the most about Grok 1.5V is the potential to solve edge cases in self-driving. Can you comment on this a little bit?
Yeah. I think this is the missing piece to really get to, strong superhuman performance. And I knew it as soon as I tried ChatGPT Vision for the first time. As soon as I tried ChatGPT Vision for the first time and I took a picture of my table, I started talking to it. I said, "What's on this table?" And it just described exactly what was there. I knew that this level of understanding, this kind of context from crawling the internet, was the missing sort of vision piece that you would need for self-driving. And so I said, "Oh man, this is just an incredible vision capability OpenAI has. Wouldn't it be great if Tesla had this kind of capability too?" And now XAI, which is not Tesla, but is another company that Elon Musk owns, has created this Grok vision model, which they say is very good. It's very competitive. They intend for it to be a competitive model with things like GPT-4. And they say it's even better at spatial reasoning problems than GPT-4 vision, which, I haven't looked at this claim myself, but that's what they're saying. And it's actually interesting if you read the short little page on Grok 1.5 with vision, they say that they did a lot of training on real world driving videos. So, I wonder where they got this video from, if they collected it themselves, or if maybe there's some sort of deal with Tesla here where, okay, here, we'll give you some data. Maybe we also get access to your models or something like that in exchange. So I think that's really interesting that they mentioned training on some real world data. And then they showed some examples of, okay, which is bigger, the scissors or the pizza cutter? Oh, they're about the same size, like those kinds of questions, right? And just the kind of logic, the kind of context that you have in LLMs, basically taking that sort of LLM intelligence and sort of infusing it with the driving model. And this model, I think, would be able to look at the world and reason in sort of a chain of thought way, the way that you can see these LLMs do when you chat with them. So I think you could call that maybe FSD 13 or whatever the next version of FSD is. I do think these LLMs, especially these multimodal LLMs, are kind of on a collision course with these self-driving models, and that we are going to see them kind of join together, because a lot of these vision capabilities that these models have are just extremely powerful and clearly things that would be very useful for self-driving.
Thank you. And we have Sierra Catalina in the audience. She, on her profile, she says she's training Grok on XAI to the extent that she can, add any color. I understand that she's working with the company and has NDAs and everything, but I trust her judgment. She's welcome to come up to the speaker board. All right.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's a tutor at XAI. Basically, yeah, you can look up the job itself. You can look up the job yourself if you're in the San Francisco area. They are hiring, so yeah, cool stuff. I heard the team's very nice.
All right, perfect. All right. Any other questions, comments for the board? Please request to speak. Omar, I saw you had a bit of a back and forth with Gordon Johnson. He posted your video from 6 months ago. What's going on there? You guys are not
I
best
mean, this
buddies?
is how good FSD 12 has gotten. Is that the bears now have to post videos of version 11 or version 10 and claim that it's version 12. Even though I did the exact same test with Galley and it worked on an early version of version 12 in January. So this isn't actually showing how bad version 12 is. It's actually showing what an improvement version 12 is over version 11. And I think people are kind of having a hard time coming to grips with actually what's happening. It's taken so long that people are in a state of disbelief. Nobody wants to say that it's actually starting to work because they feel stupid, because everybody who said it before has sounded stupid. But objectively, we're reaching a launching point here. And I haven't seen any signs of things slowing down. It only seems like things are accelerating.
And we have a question in the replies for you too. When do you expect 12.4?
I expect it will launch before the end of the free trial period.
Okay, perfect. This space has been going on for about close to 2 hours. Any questions, comments, please request to speak. As always, this space is sponsored by my patrons. The link is at the top of your screens if you'd like to join. If there are no questions, let's see. All right.
Also, it looks like Powerwall 3 is now for sale at Best Buy, if anyone wants to buy one.
All right, great. Now let's call it a day and come back tomorrow. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will chat with you tomorrow. Take care.